What led you to that?
Well, again, a long story, but very relevant, I think, to what you're doing.
Yeah.
When we came to Canada, we went to northern British Columbia first. We needed, as settlers, we needed a sponsor in 1947 as immigrants from Holland. And we lived in a small community where our father had bought a small farm. And when I went to school, and in grade 3, I got a teacher called Mr. Wilson. Now, being northern British Columbia, the winters are bitter and long, and you couldn't send the kids out to the play yard. We didn't have those incredible snowsuits that kids have now, too. You know, they tumble around like puppies and never feel the cold, you know. But so after we'd eaten our sandwiches, the different teachers did things we could do, recreational type of things. You could go and play badminton in a gym. You could do things. Mr. Wilson did bookbinding lessons because the school textbooks were in deplorable shape, and Mr. Wilson, who was a retired British Army colonel from Britain, had learned bookbinding when he was at school. And he was not the sort of the martinet that you'd expect from a colonel.
Right.
He was the sweetest teddy bear I have ever met. And all of us loved Mr. Wilson, and we competed with each other as to who could be nicer to Mr. Wilson. It was that kind of a classroom, and I had him grade 3 and 4, and I did bookbinding. So that directed me towards the book. And I come from a very bookish family. Our mother was a writer and a painter, and you know, and my dad was a keen reader, and my mother had studied law in Holland and knew Latin and Greek, and I mean, it was that kind of a family, you know. And so then we lived in Vancouver later. We went to the art gallery to see an exhibition that Mother was keen on, and I thought it was quite all right, but the paintings were a bit wild. And then I wandered off to another gallery, and there was an exhibition of Japanese woodblock prints by Hiroshige. I was in heaven. I just spent the rest of the afternoon in that gallery, and Mother in hers, and I don't know where my father was. I wasn't even paying attention. And I think my sister was there, although she says she doesn't remember it. Well, okay. So that was the next thing, and I tried out little woodcuts, little woodblock and linoleum block prints. I didn't have the right tools. I didn't do very well, but I was already drawn to it enough, right? And then I went to university, and I took a degree in fine arts, and we did courses where there was a lot of art history, but everyone had a studio component. And we did a printmaking course, and we did an etching and an aquatint and a mezzotint, you know, all the different ones, sort of one of each. And then we did a wood cut and a lino cut, and then one day the professor said, well, you know, the last thing on the curriculum is wood engraving. And it's an awfully finicky little Victorian medium, but it's on the curriculum, so here you go. Each of you gets a little block, and the tools are on the table. We sort of 4 of us around the table. You know, you go and do what you can, you know, do a little cut of some little design on it, and then we'll print it, and then you'll understand what a wood engraving is. So, whittle, and print, and at 4:30 I said to the professor, I'm going to be a wood engraver. And he looked at me and he said, I trust you to choose a precious medium. He was not impressed. But I do him justice. In the first place, I learned so much from him, laying gold leaf and all kinds of stuff. And his own art that he did on his own was welded steel sculpture.
Oh,
big welded steel.
Huge, yes, yeah.
Well, for him, this was madness.
Yeah.
He would have been insane in half an hour if he'd had to do that.
Right.
And
it's small and
it's
delicate
and
versus the big. Yeah.
And you know, his personality and mine,
Yeah.
we never really got along. I learned like mad, and he even chose me to show slides in some of the lectures that he was giving to others that I was maybe going to have a year or two later, so that I would do well, because I'd already be introduced to that. So he was not in any way unfair. He was just being honest himself. But he showed me the little catalog that I had to order my supplies from England, because there are not many wood engravers around anyway. In Canada at the moment there are about a dozen of us for whom it's
Is that right?
they're major medium.
Oh my goodness.
I still get my blocks from England or South Africa. I mean, they're hard to get. And so, you know, I mean, and I just went ahead and I only ever did that one under instruction, and really he just let us loose with it. But that's how I got started. But then there was a lot of extra learning and going to studios, going to England where it's quite a popular medium, visiting a couple of engravers when I was in Holland, you know, visiting family, going to museums and seeing wood engravings from the last, say, 200-300 years, how it developed and so on, and always saying, oh, I like the texture of that water. Now, which little tool is going to do that one? You know, I must try that out. You know, do you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So, self-taught is not a very good word for me. I absorb like a sponge. I picked up things that people said, things I saw. I got very interested in paper making and made a self-guided trip through 9 countries in Europe to visit where handmade paper was still being made in the old traditional ways, in the old buildings where there had been. I visited a paper mill in southern France. They'd been making paper non-stop since 1382.
Oh my goodness.
And I was there in 1977, right? I mean, and there they are doing it. And I could, my French is pretty good. I could ask questions, you know, and I said, well, and you must have stopped making paper during the French Revolution. And the Frenchman stood straightened up and said, no, pas de quoi. Those hotheads up in Paris were having a revolution. You think we wanted to be bothered with that? we know what's important.
Yeah, how fun.
It was lovely.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You were in touch with an artisan with a total belief in the value of what he does, with a total sense of the traditions, right? And you know, this was a little stone building in a very tiny village up in the hills in Provence, and there were maybe 8 or 12 houses around it. I bet you that was where the workforce for that mill had come from since 1382. And his ever so great grandfather had probably been one of them.
Right.
So you were in touch with a very important thing. And I think some of my, I hope I'm not using too self-congratulatory a word, but my self-dedication, my self,
Well,
giving myself fully to this.
You had curiosity too.
Absolutely.
You know, it's the
Came
curiosity.
from seeing a man like that in his element, with the materials and with the skills. I mean, he could dip a mold into that vat and shake the pulp so that it lay in a perfectly level layer on the screen, shaking it like that, as if he was sort of shaking the crumbs off a tablecloth kind. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Like this, talking to me all the while,
Right.
and doing the next stage, and fabulous.
Yeah.
You know, and you see that, and you say, that's where I want my life to go. So you're learning life as well as learning techniques and history. You're learning it, you're absorbing it. And that's how I developed through those kinds of contacts.